me, I just don't hear you.
Parentalism.
Parentalism and
Paternalism.
paternalism.
Yes.
Paternalism. Paternalism.
He's the right, yes, he has the right pronunciation. He's the only English speaker here.
Paternalism versus
Parentalism.
parentalism.
Yes,
Okay.
which comes from parent,
Right. I thought you said clientism.
No.
No. Okay.
Okay?
I'm sorry.
No, that's a good question. If I pronounce some words in your language not correctly, you feel
Well, I didn't get the concept.
It's your American accent, we don't understand.
I think I have a Martian accent. Okay, so other people believe that there has been a supply phenomenon there, that there is something in the nature of the state that pushes the state to grow. And actually, even Buchanan himself, in a part of his career, when he wrote with Geoffrey Brennan, Power to Tax, seemed to adopt this supply side phenomenon, which is, that given the power of the state, it's natural that some people will try to use the state at their own advantage, get more benefits from the state in the process of which the state grows. Now, another interesting theorist, if you want to read something that's easier to read than economics about this, you may read de Jouvenel, Bertrand Jouvenel, Jouvenel, who has written a book which is called On Power. It was written during the war in French, but it's been translated. And as a matter of fact, you can find it free on the Liberty Fund's website. Jouvenel, Jouvenel, On Power, which argues, that the state has its own dynamics of growth, and that whatever the people want, the state is going to grow. Anyway, whatever the reason, and there's probably both there's probably both is a demand and a supply phenomenon here. If it's true that the state tends to grow non-stop, individuals may want to limit it just in order to make sure that they are not exploited by the state. And that's another that's another sub-branch of public choice economics, which is called constitutional economics, which tries to see what rational individuals signing or implicitly accepting a social contract would want as ways to limit the state. Okay, secondly, regulation. I think that we've been talking about expenditures, and everybody talks about government expenditure. I think that one of the most neglected phenomena of the 20th century has been not government expenditure, but regulation. Alexis de Tocqueville, the famous French political scientist, 19th century, had forecasted that a democratic country you would have I'm quoting him, a network of small, complicated rules, minute and uniform, which is what we now have in our countries. It's difficult to measure legislation, but you can get a proxy, as Walter was mentioning, by looking at the number of pages of new laws and regulations. During the second mandate of George Bush, I think there were 70,000 pages in the Federal Register, which is basically, some of these regulations were obviously, or laws were modifying previous laws, but most of the time it was not, to actually make them more liberal. It was to make them more liberal in the classical sense. It was to make them more restrictive. And we have interesting data that come from two American think tanks, the Mercatus Center and the Weidenbaum Center. We have a long series of data on the expenditures of the U.S. federal government on regulation, conceiving, writing regulation, and partly enforcing them, but only partly enforcing them. The idea being that if there is more regulation, government probably has to spend more money on actually bringing them to bear on society, and if there is less, the government will spend less. So, we know that between 1960 and 2007, so-called economic regulation has been multiplied by 7. again using government expenditure in real dollars as a proxy. And we know that so-called social regulation, which covers things like, health, workplace environment, and this sort of thing, has grown by a factor of 15 over this, this little half of a century. With the result that there are a few things that we do that don't need some sort of permit or authorization. As you know, just to drive a car requires a permit, and everybody seems to agree with this now. To take a flight does not really require a permission, but you do have to more or less strip before you take the flight to have the permission to take your flight. And of course, whichever, in most occupations, you need some sort of permit to operate. Only the academics probably avoid this, which might be why you don't see as much that regulation has grown so much over the 20th century. Okay, so one thing that is important to realize is that when the state regulates, just as when the state raises tax money to pay for its expenditures, and just as the state actually spends the money that's raised, you always have winners and losers, or you nearly always have winners and losers. Let me open a little parentheses there. I say that that nearly always, because there is an argument, which is the Olson argument, or the Nozick argument, or the Holcomb argument, or the kind of which Jan, without agreeing, presented before, that there is some part of public life, which is basically security, protection, that represents a public good. And that in this case, really everybody wants this. So if we assume that everybody wants protection and that only the state is able to provide it, state expenditures on protection, national security and interior security, is going to benefit to everybody. Now, mind you, it's not necessarily going to benefit to everybody in the same way, and not everybody is necessarily going to pay the taxes that correspond to the benefits one gets. But at least in this case, you can make the argument that what the state does, whether it regulates or whether it raises money, is useful for everybody. When you get away from this very broad, and general, or basic, I should say, category of the basic conditions for society to work peacefully, then the more you get into activities that actually have both winners and losers. And if you look at anything the state does, you have winners and you have losers. And often the winners are the ones who have been asking for the intervention, and the losers support this, either because they have no choice or because they think that when the turn comes, they will be able to screw the bastards and get something that's convenient for them. There are many examples of this. I'm not going to. Well, I might mention the war on drugs after, but right now I can give you smoking as an example. Right? When the state intervenes to prevent people from smoking, even if you assume, which I think you have no reason to, but even if you assume that many smokers are actually happy, the state is going to force them to quit smoking, there are still some smokers who would want to continue smoking. There are still some restaurant owners who would like to admit smokers. So even if it is in minority, there are still people who are harmed by the state intervention, and lots of others, of course, who are benefited. All the people who are working in the public health sector are, of course, benefiting because they can carry on studies and they can make presentations to the government to increase the restrictions on smokers and so on and so forth. And of course, you have the non-smokers who, there are people, I assume, who actually don't like cigarette smoke and who are happy to be able to go anywhere they want now and have no smoke. So these people are benefited. But the people who would have wanted to go to the bar and smoke, they are harmed. Most of the things, if not all, that government does, or the state does, creates winners and the losers. And usually, the winners and the losers are not randomly chosen. They are chosen by the state. Among the winners are really the people whose consent the state needs, and the losers are the people whose consent the state does not need. The state does not need the consent of smokers, who are only 20% of population, who have been denormalized, as they say in the trade now, by public policy, who feel ashamed to smoke, and who are anyway, among the least educated part of the population. Statistically, smokers are less educated than non-smokers. They earn less money. So, they are, I would be exaggerating a bit if I would say that smokers are white trash, but just a bit, white trash do smoke more than I'm sorry, yes, do smoke more than non-smokers. Smokers, is in smoke more, yes. Did I say something funny, or it's...
Smokers smoke more than non-smokers.
We'll cut the tape there. No, I meant white trash smoke more than non-white trash. Because they are part of the statistical category of smokers, less educated, lower income, and actually, you just have to open your eyes in society and you see who's smoking now. The people, good people like us are not smoking. White trash are. So, it's another way. So, if we are interested in regulation, we are living in soft fascist society where regulations are soft in the sense that they don't throw you in jail immediately. You have many years to adapt your behavior to whatever they want you to do. They don't torture you in jail, usually. You can be beaten by policemen, but it doesn't happen very often, actually.
Get raped. Get raped a lot.
By whom?
It's common knowledge that people that go to jail, that there's a homosexual thing.
Okay, yes, sure.
Mark Emery is afraid of that.
Okay. Well, actually, well, that was my point, more or less. Regulation, we live under soft tyranny, but the tyranny is not soft on anybody. And Mark Emery is indeed the case of somebody for whom tyranny is not exactly soft. Well, I could say a lot about the war on drugs, which does again illustrate this idea that government intervention has winners and losers. And the losers in this case are everybody involved on the wrong side of the wicket in the war on drugs, including not only the 35,000 people who've died in Mexico since 2005 because of the war on drugs, but all the people who go to jail because of drugs, all the people who get a criminal record for their whole lives because they've been caught with, well, in some cases even only consuming drugs. So the state is essentially again, in order to take into consideration the possibility that there might be one public good provided by the state, which would not be exclusively redistributive. But besides this exception, the state is essentially a redistributive machine. It redistributes money or other advantages in life to some people at the expense of others. And again, the ones that benefit are usually the ones whose consent, support the state needs.